Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari A to Z, a series of short playthroughs of Atari 8-bit games, some which I grew up with and some which are new to me. Today is one of the latter. Today we're looking at a game called Xagon, or Xagon, begins with X anyway. There's not very many games that begin with X on the Atari 8-bit, so we're going to run out of these at some point. Well, Xagon, as we'll call it for today, is a public domain release for Atari 8-bit developed in 1984. Now, like most public domain pieces of software from the period, there's not a ton of information that's been recorded about this online, but there are some interesting inconsistencies with regard to who the game is credited to, depending on where you acquire it from. So the version on AtariMania.com is credited to David Pentecost and a group called MACE Australia, which I couldn't find any information about, but ACE in Atari context often stands for Atari Computer Enthusiasts. There's a very well-known group from Eugene, Oregon, who goes by ACE, and a lot of their work used to end up in magazines like Page 6 and Antic and Analog as well. But I don't know anything about MACE Australia. The version that you'll find in the HomeSoft collection of Atari disk images and executable files, though, is attributed to Troll Software, which I'd say is a cracking and piracy group, but since it's a public domain software, there's really no need to crack or pirate this software, so I don't really know what's going on there. The version that's attributed to David Pentecost can also be found as part of Page 6 magazine's public domain library on disk 111 as well, so if you happen to have access to those, I think they're all archived online. That's one place you can find this game. So that's about all I can tell you about it for the moment, so let's go play Xagon.
Okay, here we are with Xagon, or Xagon, or however you pronounce it. This is the version from the HomeSoft collection. Like I said at the start, this is attributed to Troll Software in that particular version, but elsewhere it's credited to David Pentecost. So I would assume that's the more legitimate source of this game. But like I say, this appears to be a public domain release, so quite why a piracy group, if indeed that was a piracy group, would get involved with this is anyone's guess. But anyway, here we are. So, let's hit start and play. So, this is a kind of Q Bert style game in which you have to jump on these platforms and cause them to drop down to a point where they make that sort of bleeping noise. And you'll notice that some of the platforms, they move up and down gradually, and some of them stay static. And you also have to watch out for the enemies who appear on the stripy platforms. Now, there's a few interesting things about this game. The main one is the fact that rather than moving by cubes as you do in Q Bert, all of the platforms are hexagonal in this one. Which means that rather than just having 4 directions you can move, there's actually 6. Now that does make the controls a little bit awkward in a few places, because it means that in order to move diagonally in this game, you actually have to push diagonally on the joystick, which is a little bit fiddly. And those of you who've played Q Bert will know that Q Bert actually specifically avoided doing that by making it so that you just pushed up, down, left and right at any time. So if you wanted to, you could hold your joystick at a sort of 45-degree angle, and that would accurately reflect what you were doing on screen, but there was no need to actually push diagonally. So once you got used to which direction corresponded to which diagonal on the isometric perspective, it was much easier. But in this one, it takes a little bit of getting used to. Just because pushing diagonally for the majority of your movements isn't the most natural thing to do. But like I say, as with anything, it's something you can grow accustomed to, something you can oops. Oh, that's a teleporter. Yeah, something you can figure out for yourself. Oh, that's annoying. Oh, you can jump in place as well. If you press the fire button, you jump in place. That's good to know. So that saves you having to jump back and forth across the same platforms over and over again. Ouch! There we go. Another level down. This game's really nicely presented, actually. It's like you see around the outside of the screen, it's making use of the Atari's high-resolution modes and the text modes combined to create a really nice-looking interface. What killed me there? Oh no, I just beat the level. And then in the middle, we've got slightly lower resolution graphics, but really strong use of colour, along with the Atari's 4 hardware sprites. That's creating a really nice look and feel for this game. I don't think it's a stretch to say that this game is pretty much professional quality. I mean, I've played commercial games on the Atari 8-bit that are considerably worse than this game. Oh, game over. We get to put our name in. Excellent. Pete. So yeah, I have played games that are far worse than this game on the Atari 8-bit that people were charging money for. So for this to be public domain is, I'd say pretty remarkable. But I've seen so many good public domain and free bits of software on the Atari 8-bit by this point that it's not as much of a surprise as it was, but it's still worth highlighting. You know, we take a lot of free software and open source things for granted today, but that sort of thing's really been a thing since the beginning. There were people who just put software together because they loved programming, because they loved making games, because they loved making utilities, they loved making applications, and they loved trying to get the best out of the Atari. And in the absence of any sort of concrete information on this particular game here, I guess that's what we've got here. This is someone just decided to make a game because they wanted to experiment with the techniques they could use on the Atari. And they've done a great job. This is a fun game. Once you get your head around the controls, it's really enjoyable. I mean, it's simple, but so many games from the period were. Simple arcade-style games were the way to go on the 8-bit platforms, for the most part. There are exceptions, obviously. There's plenty of cool adventure games and role-playing games and that sort of thing, but where these platforms really shone, I should say. Where these platforms really shone was in sort of fairly straightforward arcade-style experiences. Whoops. Oh dear. And I think part of that is down to a lot of developers wanting to mirror what Atari themselves had done. So if you look back at the Atari 2600 and some of its best and most iconic games, those are all sort of simple arcade-style games that a play session would be just a few minutes at a time. 2 minutes, 16 seconds in a lot of cases. And so, although the Atari 8-bit was capable of more complex experiences, and indeed did some really good, more complex experiences, a lot of people chose to follow what they thought of as the Atari formula. Which is to make something that is pick up and play, perhaps tricky to master, but which provides that certain addictive quality. And that's certainly what we've got here, for sure. I like the variety in the enemies as well, that's cool. Oh, we're dead again. Much better score that time, though. Very nice. Yeah, so like I say, this is a really good quality game. It's got plenty of variety. The level designs don't get too complicated. If you compare this to something like Flip and Flop that we looked at a while back, the level designs aren't super complicated, and there's no sort of maze-like feel to these levels. But honestly, that doesn't matter too much. When you throw in the elements like the moving platforms and the transporters and the enemies and that sort of thing, it doesn't matter too much that they're not especially maze-like. They are different shapes. As you can see, this level's a different shape to the first one. It just doesn't leave you sort of able to get stuck in dead ends and that sort of thing, which is probably for the best. Probably for the best, but it did certainly add an interesting dimension to Flip and Flop's gameplay, in that you really had to sort of plan your route out in that one. And also bear in mind, in Flip and Flop, you're only dealing with one enemy at once as well. And there was a very specific way of dealing with that enemy. Whereas in this one, you're dealing with multiple enemies of different types. And as far as I'm aware, there's no way to actually defeat them. You just need to avoid them. So in that sense, it's probably for the best that things don't get too maze-like, because that would make things a bit too difficult, probably. I don't know. I'm not a game designer. I've just played a lot of games. Oh no, that was stupid. Ooh, I'm probably going to beat my score again. I'm getting better each time I play this. Oh no! Oh, I did beat it. Nice. I seem to be getting less far through the game each time, but actually scoring more points. So I guess that's an improvement, maybe? Possibly. I don't know. Let's try one more time, and then we'll wrap up for today. Because I think we've pretty much seen everything this game has to offer. But like I say, it is a game worth returning to and playing a fair few times, because you'll gradually come to master it. You'll get higher scores. You'll figure out how to deal with the various types of enemies. And you'll have a good time. I'm very fond of hexagons as an aesthetic as well. Those of you who follow my other work will know that I play a lot of role-playing games, and a very common sight in a lot of role-playing games is to have some sort of futuristic or technological style dungeon, often towards the end of the game, that makes heavy use of hexagons as a sort of thematic and aesthetic element. And that's something I've always liked, and I kind of get that vibe from the presentation of this game. There's just something inherently pleasing about hexagons to me. I used to find hexagons in gaming quite intimidating, because they're also associated with war games, which are a very complicated type of game. But they're nothing to be scared of. Oh, yeah, I remember. They're nothing to be frightened of. The hexagons can't hurt you. Those enemies can, though, so... Yeah, now that one we do have a dead end, don't we? Okay, so... I take back what I said about there not being any dead ends in this game, but... yeah, I still wouldn't call this a maze as such. Yeah, another dead end here. Oh no, that's not a dead end, is it? It's just got that low platform. It's playing with the perspective a bit as well, which is interesting. I didn't mean to do that. Never mind. Oh, I see. They're like paired, so you need to sort of balance them out in some cases. That's interesting. Yeah, if you look, when I'm jumping on that one, another one was moving at the same time, so... Cool. Yeah, this game just keeps getting better and better. The more I play it, the more cool stuff there is to discover. So yeah, props to David Pentecost and or Troll Software. Oh, look at that, over 10,000. Beautiful. I don't like the balloon. It follows you around. So you kind of need to use those transporters to get away from it effectively. Screen 9. Not sure if we got this far before. I don't remember seeing that array. Oh, we're dead anyway. Well, we got to screen 9 with 13,643 points. That's eminently respectable, I think. But yeah, like I say, that's probably everything there is to say about this game for the minute. But it's definitely worth playing. It's definitely worth playing. And like I say, as a public domain piece of software as well, you can download and enjoy it without guilt as well. Not that most people who are exploring and sharing old 8-bit games these days do feel much in the way of guilt, but and so you shouldn't, because these games are worth preserving, and heaven knows that the original companies behind them either aren't around anymore or aren't interested in preserving them. So cool. It's especially cool when stuff like this is preserved, because as sort of free software, as public domain software, there was sort of no real concrete archived copy of this in the first place. So aside from appearances in places like the Page 6 public domain library, which I mentioned, yeah, there was no boxed copy of this to collect. So it was just something that either you would have bought as part of a public domain collection, or that you would have copied and given to a friend. So it's cool that this has survived until now. Anyway, that was Xagon, or Xagon, or however you choose to pronounce it. Yeah, I enjoyed that. That's good stuff. Good stuff. So let's leave that there for now. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.